This one's about William Rehnquist and the Supreme Court. Okay, so I was looking to bring my brief, tiny, micro education on the Supreme Court to an end, and I figured that a good way to do it would be to read something written by an insider, a member of that esteemed judicial body. So I got a book on that subject written by William Rehnquist, former Associate Justice and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He wrote that his intention was to follow a trail on the borderline between history and constitutional law. In his account, history is like the setting, and the constitutional law is the jewel of the piece. I thought Rehnquist excelled at laying out the historical contexts, and he was always very clear, no matter how complex the legal issues might be. The book is a mix of the history of the court and the author's own interaction with it, from a novice law clerk driving east through a snowstorm in his little Studebaker, all the way to becoming Chief Justice. The book is very much a personal account, and it is full of feeling, as well as legal matters. He credits his daughter with helping him sound not too much like a lawyer, and if that is so, she did a fine job. The law is always in the foreground, but there is more than that. He credits one justice with having the great gift of common sense, and he notes that the court can act with what he calls discretion, a careful weighing of all the surrounding circumstances. At stake in all the most important cases is the proper balance between authority and liberty, the state and the individual. And there is something else about the book, a subtext that pervades it. Even someone as ignorant of the law as I am knows that courts like to boast that we in the United States are fortunate to enjoy a government of law, not men. And I would expect a book about the Supreme Court to be about the purity and inviolability of that relationship between government and law. But Rehnquist's book, again and again, is about men and women, the ones who read the law, interpret the law, the ones who make the law. He supplies pictures of many of the justices and provides a sketch of their person for every single one, I think, giving the reader a feel for who we're dealing with and who was dealing with us. Not everyone, in his estimation, was up to the mark, but the mixture of the law, as expressed in the Constitution and the acts of Congress and the President, the times, and the pressing issues of those times, and the human natures of those who can compromise the nine at that time, acting independently to arrive at an opinion, a majority opinion at least, that would then stand as the law, that was the working of the court. As Rehnquist says, for all its effort, experience, and great precision, that work is an inexact science. Sometimes they are too timid, sometimes they are too bold, and sometimes they might get it right. I see the Supreme Court as 9 blindfolded, earnest people trying to describe a strange creature. They have help in this. Bright young law clerks, skillful attorneys who write briefs and give oral arguments, as well as the ruling registered in the lower courts. With all of that, plus their understanding of the law, and the law itself, they are 9 blindfolded, earnest people trying to describe a strange creature. The subject was dear to his heart, and he found it a very human undertaking. As a clerk, during the case to decide if Truman had the power to seize control of the steel industry, Rehnquist paused to ponder what manner of men were these justices, who were now called upon to decide a very important constitutional question of presidential power. He proceeds to map, in brief, the character of each one. It is critical to know exactly who is making this decision. This group of 9 heads are better than one. And he included this as well, a note by Justice Samuel Miller about Chief Justice Roger Taney. When I came to Washington, I had never looked upon the face of Judge Taney, but I knew of him. I remembered that he had attempted to throttle the Bank of the United States, and I hated him for it. I remembered that he took his seat upon the bench, as I believed, in reward for what he had done in that connection, and I hated him for that. He had been the chief spokesman for the court on the Dred Scott case, and I hated him for that. But from my first acquaintance with him, I realized that these feelings toward him were but the suggestions of the worst elements of our nature. For before the first term of my service in the court had passed, I more than liked him. I loved him. And after all that has been said of that great good man, I stand always ready to say that conscience was his guide and the sense of duty his principle. For my part, this book surprised me. I loved it, and I was sad to see it end.